The last phase of the behavioral design process is implement, which essentially means we take our intervention, we turn it into a prototype, and we start testing. Now, testing is fundamental to behavioral design. Being a science-backed process, testing and testing and testing is really important. And for a behavioral designer, there's essentially two approaches to testing. The first is measure, where you look to discover the first immediate responses of a project. You discover whether your idea actually works, whether people engage with it, and you can adapt your product depending on whether they interacted or whether they didn't. Measure is usually the metrics that you find in other design spaces like UX or product design, so things like retention or engagement. Now, after measure is monitor, and monitor is really important to a behavioral designer because behavior change takes time. It can take weeks, it can take months, and in some cases it can take years. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do behavioral design, because that's what measure is for. Measure looks at the immediate response, but monitor is really where the wealth of information is. And we monitor key changes to people's behavior over time. And we use a tool called outcome mapping to do that. And outcome mapping is a way of just asking, well, what will happen in the future so that I know that my solution is working now and in 2 weeks and in 4 weeks and in 12 months and in 3 years. It helps us as a team look out for key indicators that we use to actually discover whether it's working or not. Now, these indicators are actually really useful because they act as red flags. And if something else had changed in people's behavior, whether it be in the emerging acts, so some new technology has arrived, or whether there's a new social campaign, so a norm has changed and your solution doesn't work anymore, indicators act as red flags. And it means that you can stop and look and redirect an intervention before actually it gets to complete failure. And that brings us to the end of the intensive. I've given you an overview of the behavioral design process. Of course, it's an overview. There are lots and lots and lots of other tools and processes and factors that we haven't even touched on. One main one that's missing that you've probably noticed is nudge, where you essentially change the choice architecture to influence people's decisions. And as we reach the end of the intensive, I have given you an overview of the behavioral design process. Of course, it's an overview. There's things that aren't included. There's different tools and processes and ideas that we just haven't had time to go into. One main one being nudge. Nudge is where you change the choice architecture to influence people's decisions. But what I'd like to do is close out on another topic that I think is incredibly important to talk about, and that is one of ethics. Essentially, as a behavioral designer, you are using behavioral science as a design tool. You're using it to influence people, which means you have to do it ethically. Behavioral design in its very nature is designed to improve people's lives, but also you have an ethical responsibility as a designer and as a creative to use this insight in a way that is positive to both the individual and to society. So I've included a couple of resources, a couple of articles to read, and also a template where you can assess your solution based on ethical principles. That's it from me. Good luck. Go forth, oh new behavioral designer.